All right, we are live. Welcome, everybody. My name is Yuri, and we have Nicole, who's an immigration lawyer. And we try to do this. I think this is our second round, Nicole. So, welcome back. And I think this is also going on your channel. So, I'm welcomed over there. But, Nicole, maybe before we get started, who might have not watched our first session, if you can do like a quick intro and also talk about Manifest.
Sure. Also, first, thank you for having me. Welcome, everyone, to today's conversation. Just to briefly introduce myself, I am Nicole Gunara. I am the principal immigration attorney here at Manifest Law. Manifest Law is a tech-forward immigration firm. We try to leverage the best in software, the best in custom design proprietary things, right, in order to get you the results that you are looking for. But thank you again, Yudi, for having me here, and happy to answer questions and talk about things that people want to talk about.
Amazing. And also for everyone who's just joining, there is a link in the description. If you are ever in a need of an immigration lawyer and need a consultation, I think my link has some discounts. So check it out if you need to. But Nicole, let's start with the number one question, which is what the heck is going on with the registration? Who needs to register? I am an F1 student. Do I need to register? I am on OPT. I'm waiting for my EAD, or I got on OPT. I got picked in H1B. Maybe you can talk about that.
Sure. I understand everyone's kind of like freaking out, asking questions regarding registration. So let's try to keep it simple, right? For most of you, right, especially the example you gave me when you're coming in on an F1, if you came into the United States, you have an I-94, a 994 was issued to you, whether it's paper or electronic, then you're technically already registered. There's nothing that you really need to do so long as that was done for you at some point in the past, even if that I-94 has since expired, right? The people that really should be considering this or really focusing on, hey, I need to get a registration done, is anyone who entered the country under the age of 14 and then turned 14, because before you turned 14, you couldn't do fingerprinting anyways. You couldn't provide your biometrics. So if you're turning 14 while you're in the United States, then that's somebody that needs to reach out as soon as possible to consider the registration. Parents of somebody who's turning 14 that's in the US, that's something that should also be considered as well. And I will also note to you that if you also did not come into the US through the normal means, right? You either came in through the border without submitting yourself for inspection, then you are also required to do the registration. But to be frank, the full list that kind of really expresses, who can register and who doesn't need to register is on the USCIS website. And if you do need to register, you need to do so within the 30-day timeline that the government provides for certain individuals.
Nice. Okay. Amazing. And then next thing, I see people asking questions already. So feel free to line up your questions. We'll get to it in a minute. But next thing is F1 visa revocation. A lot of them happened over the last couple of weeks. And I know some of them are filing a lawsuit, or some of them are already in the lawsuit. What's happening? Do you have like a status on it? Do you know, are you following up on the lawsuits?
Yeah, so I've seen like a wide variety of things kind of come up, but the most significant one is that here in New York State, I believe there was a student who managed to get a temporary restraining order. Essentially, a judge issued this restraining order telling the government that you can't really do this, like you need to put this person back into their appropriate status, right? And right now, what the government is arguing against that is that the revocation of the I-20 is not necessarily the revocation of an F1, which is a very, very thin distinction. As everybody knows here, if your status is terminated, even if technically you're still on F1, you're not really allowed to be here. So effectively, you're being removed. Those arguments are still ongoing, but that temporary restraining order shows that certain judges in certain states are willing to protect individuals who have unfortunately had their statuses revoked without really strong due process. Other things that I've been hearing through the woodwork is that some universities are willing to do a reinstatement process, essentially issuing a new I-20, having the students file an I-539 in order to reinstate themselves into an F1. But what I would say is please don't just rely on the university or the college for guidance. Please make sure to talk to an appropriate immigration professional or attorney, primarily because depending on why you were revoked, that is going to, in my perspective, impact whether or not you should be doing any of these things that people are doing, whether it's a lawsuit, whether it's reinstatement, or potentially choosing to leave the country and trying to come back on a brand new F1.
Amazing. Okay. Great. And I'm sure there's going to be more questions. So we'll get to the questions part. And then as the question comes in, and if we need to explore any topic, we can go from there. Sure. Is there anything else that's going on in the immigration world other than these two topics that we already addressed?
I mean, right now we're in the height of the H-1B season, right? Many congratulations to people who've been selected. And to those who haven't been selected, gentle reminder, could be a second round coming up, right? Every single year, it seems that there have been second rounds, except for 1 year, I would think, in the last 5 years. But for those who didn't get selected and you feel like you're running out of time or you don't want to rely on the H-1B, now is a good time to start preparing for other alternative pathways, whether it's an O-1 or realizing a different visa status to allow you to stay.
I think one of these days we should do maybe a deep dive on O1s and EB1s and national interest and all of that. I think that I know my audience will be interested in it, but like we should plan like a deep dive sessions on those topics.
Sure. Mm-hmm.
Nice. Okay, let's get through the question. I am an F1 visa student from this university. Do you have any options for H-1B self-sponsor? I need more information.
Yeah, so Asfaq, I'll tell you that technically under the new H-1B modernization rules, there are ways to self-sponsor, especially if you're an entrepreneur, you're starting your own startup. What I will say is that if you're going to do a startup, you still have to do the lottery process. But one of the most important things I try to tell people is that if you want to self-sponsor an H-1B, you got to start building a business. Under initial OPT, you're allowed to do that. You start your own business, you get the funding, you start putting together operations. The government is probably going to be more willing to allow you to self-sponsor your H-1B if you have something to show for it rather than just a shell company.
Love it. Okay. This is probably another topic that we should be doing. I'm noting down all my mental notes that we should be doing all these topics. Okay. Does a dismissed parking ticket have any impact on I-485 application? I'm currently on H-1B.
So this is a little bit of a loaded question because I need to know more about the parking ticket. But what I will say is that you should declare anything and everything that you've ever done on your 485, right? This also includes speeding tickets. In terms of whether or not it has an impact, depends, right? State, city, town, context, right? But for the most part, please make sure to include that in your application that this occurred to you.
Okay. Can failing to do OPT 6th or 18th month validation report, miss the deadline, but submitted after a couple of months, be grounds for service termination if someone has a clean record and no social media?
I think I need to kind of break down that question a little bit more. So I assume that you just didn't revalidate with your school. Honestly, that's really a conversation for your DSO. I find that when it comes to the management of SEVIS or the management of the I-20s that allow you to do these OPTs, it does come back to the flexibility of your designated school officer on what reasonings that they want to put or how they can help you. So your school is the best bet.
Okay. My daughter is on H4 with adjustment of status pending as my dependent. She is going to be 16 end of this month. She was last fingerprinted around mid-November 2023. She was 14 years, 7 months at that time. Does she need to re-register?
No, based at least on this information that I have on this particular comment or question, it's because she has a 485 filed. And if you guys have already done the biometrics for that AOS, then you should be good to go.
Nice. Rohit, let me know if you have follow-up. I see you. Also, quick disclaimer. I think we should read all the disclaimers, but this does not form any attorney-client relationship. I just wanted to say that as well.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. To to change status from adjustment of status EAD to H-1B cap exempt, do we have to travel outside the country for visa stamp when approved, or okay to go for visa interview when we travel outside the country?
So I think it kind of depends on the underlying status. What I want to remind people is that an adjustment of status is a pending status, right? It's not really the status that you're technically changing from. So if you maintained your underlying status, let's say you're adjusting from an F1 to a green card, right? Then there is grounds for you to change status in the United States to an H-1B if you maintained that underlying F1. But if not, you may need to travel out of the country to activate it. But I do think that this is a question that you need to direct in a consultation because it depends on the timeline. What are you doing? What is the context of the adjustment? It's a very loaded question without more details.
Like that. Okay. How is H-1B extension approvals nowadays from your petitions?
Honestly, I haven't had that much of an issue. I think a lot of people are concerned because under Biden, it was, super easy, right? The extensions were pretty administrative. There was a lot of people thinking like, oh, under Trump, these things are going to be harder. What if it's a low salary job, et cetera? We haven't had any issues. There wasn't like an uptick in an RFE or anything like that. I think so long as your job makes sense, aligns with the H-1B requirements, there shouldn't be too much of a problem for the renewal.
Nice. Okay, great. I have applied for STEM OPT and my current OPT date is in June. My STEM OPT is not approved yet. I just wanted to know, how does the automatic STEM extension works? Do I need to do anything from my side?
So assuming that you properly filed the extension for the STEM OPT prior to the end of your existing OPT EAD card, you would be granted an automatic extension to continue working based on that existing OPT EAD, right, for that employer. And then once your STEM OPT is approved, then you're good to go. You'll get the EAD card then. You don't necessarily need anything on your side, but if you're really, really concerned about maintenance of status, it's important to make sure that everything's reflected on your I-20 and to make sure that you go to your DSO to make sure that the correct employer is listed on that I-20.
Nice. Okay. And how long do automatic STEM extension you get? Like, is it 180 days or is it more or?
So give me 1 second because the dates have changed. I believe it's an automatic 180-day extension.
Yeah, gotcha. Okay. Can dentists qualify for EB2 national interest waiver?
Dentists, wow. So I will say that I have seen dentists get approved for an EB10IW, but it really depends on what exactly you're going to be doing, right? I've seen people who are leading preventative dentistry programs on a national scale have a good impact. People who are trying to expand dentistry into rural areas that generally don't have access to such good preventative care have approvals, but I would not lie to you that it's not necessarily a common prospect, right? Maybe in certain areas of advanced dentistry where you have specific types of certifications that are quite rare, there could be avenues in that scale, but it is definitely not necessarily a common pathway.
And you guys do help with EB2 national interest waiver, right? Manifest.
Yeah, we do. We do provide advice when it comes to thinking about what kinds of endeavors would arise to the level of national interest, the kinds of documents and evidence that you should be collecting, and also the kind of research that could help support the arguments that the government is looking for in an EB2NIW.
On that note, is the EB2 program ending?
So at this time, no. It doesn't seem that there's a lot of discussion about the program ending. There's maybe some discussion that the EB2NIW might have, different interpretations, but the reality is that it's a pretty strong program. There are still positive adjudications at this time, and I still encourage people to really consider it as an avenue for themselves.
Okay. I'll pass out. I think he meant graduate. This may not be applied OPT, may not be applied OPT. Am I too late or is it just fine? I'm
going to make a few assumptions here, just like you did, right? I'm assuming you're saying that you're going to pass, graduate in May from a bachelor's degree program or something that would grant you an OPT, for example. The way that it works is something known as the 90, 60, 30-day rule, right? The earliest that you can apply is 90 days prior to your graduation date. The latest you can apply is 60 days after your graduation date. And then the 30-day rule part is that within 30 days of the school issuing you that OPT recommendation, you must file that 765 or EAD form. So it's hard for me to say if you're late or not too late. All I can say is that in May, you do have some time.
Yeah, got it. Okay. Challenge to changes visa counselor into adjustment of status. Assume the petitioner is in US and legal status.
Okay, so if you're gonna say adjustment of status, I'm going to assume it's like an I-140 or like a green card approved process. So if the green card was approved for a foreign consular process, there is a process that you have to go through to transfer that case theoretically. But honestly, you need to talk to a lawyer about it. Because I'm not sure. So my curiosity here, Daniman, is are you actually talking about an adjustment of status or are you talking about a change of status? Because people mix those things up.
Yeah. And Rohit is reconfirming the re-registration after the age of 14 does not apply to her case, correct? And then
so just as a disclaimer, right? Nothing will ever replace an attorney consultation. So it's hard for me to really 100% confirm, but this is what I will say is clearly listed in the USCIS website. If you have an AOS pending and you did a biometrics process as part of that AOS, you are not required to re-register.
Nice. Okay. I am on H-1B in academia, lost job due to fund back blockage at NIH. Can I do B1, B2 visa to stay longer? Do I need receipt to maintain legal status? I have I-140 approved. Does it bar from B1, B2 visa?
So I'm going to try to answer the question to the best that I can. Again, another attorney disclaimer, this doesn't create an attorney-client relationship, very much a general answer. So generally, people are not precluded or prevented from changing from H-1B to the B-1, B-2, so long as they file within that normal grace period after your termination. Please note that the grace period is 60 days unless your I-94 ends sooner than that, right? If you file timely, you should be able to stay while it's pending. My only concern is that remember that the B1, B2 is supposed to have single intent. You're not necessarily supposed to have dual intent or intention to permanently immigrate to the United States. So if you have an I-140 approved, sometimes you'll find an officer who has grounds to say, wait a second, it doesn't seem like you have the intention to leave the United States. Is this appropriate? To be honest with you, I would actually recommend that you speak to an attorney to see what options you have to potentially stay in the United States before considering filing to change your status to a B1, B2.
Okay. There we go. I'm on H-1B, didn't file AR-11 last 3 times. I moved to new apartment. Can I do it now? Any implications on my PERM application?
I would say you should definitely always file your AR-11 whenever you move. I would recommend that you definitely do it now. In terms of implications on a PERM application, it depends on which states that you're in the PERM, but historically, I haven't had too much of an impact. But remember, prior results doesn't necessarily guarantee results for you. It's just really important that, at least for your most updated address, that you definitely tell the government about it.
Nice. Okay. Do you believe proposal with respect to small business that fit EB2 national interest waiver requirement on paper qualify for national interest waiver? Concern since the proposal is with respect to small business.
So I think there's a big difference between supporting small businesses throughout America that really struggle to get certain resources versus you are proposing the creation of a small business, right? Remember that the national interest waiver is all about national scales of impact. Are you going to be able to arise to the occasion of national interest? Small businesses really struggle with that because you're small. So how can something small really impact on a national scale?
Interesting. Can a TN dependent work?
No. TD dependents are not able to work, but let's be clever about this. You don't necessarily have to come to the United States on a TD visa. If you're married to someone on a TN, you can always get your own TN if you're also Canadian, or figure out another visa that allows you as a principal applicant to work in the US.
Nice. What document F1 student on STEM OPD should carry on them as per the new guidelines? Also, what is the mandatory format, paper or digital? Oh yes, I forgot to ask you this. This was another thing that people have to have their documents all the time, carry passport, green card, like physical document, or is it digital?
You know, I will say, just to be conservative, physical is always best, right? You're not necessarily guaranteed the right to pull open your phone, go on the internet, look something up, right? I recommend that you always carry your EAD card with you in this circumstance. I always recommend carrying a copy at minimum of your I-94 record and your I-20 as well, if you can, right? Honestly, it could be a small version of it, fold it up, put it into your wallet, right? So that you can pull it out and just show it to the officer. It's so ridiculous. It's kind of the concept of me traveling to another country and carrying my passport everywhere, right? Which doesn't necessarily make sense if I have a good ID card, but these are the times that we're living in, and I would rather you be better prepared.
So even passport, or passport is fine?
Honestly, I would probably bring your passport or a form of, rely on like a student ID. If you have a driver's license, you should bring that with you as well. But you remember that your EAD card is also a form of identification. So if you don't have an EAD card, you should always have on you a form of ID of some format.
Gotcha. So got it. Okay. Because I'm like, if I'm going to a grocery shopping, I'm not gonna carry my passport.
I know it's so ridiculous. So like the reality though is that what the officers are usually trying to do is identify you are who you are and that you have the right to be in the United States, right? You can have all the documents that say that you have the right to be in the US, but that doesn't prove that you are who you are saying on that document, right? Unless you have some sort of proof of identification.
Got it. Okay. Friend's roommate got detained with $22,000 debt on credit card loans. Will he have to repay if he won't come back to US? What if he come back? Legal action from bank?
So this is a question that I can't necessarily answer, primarily because there's maybe a level of criminality or civil issues that are kind of outstanding. So I won't be able to really strongly comment on this one, unfortunately.
No worries. Yeah. Okay. Got picked on H-1B and in process of filing. Do I need to report parking speeding ticket when switched to a non-moving violation? My lawyer didn't ask.
So that's the better answer actually to this, is that you should always tell your lawyer when you get the opportunity, right? So now that you know that this is something that you have, it doesn't hurt for you to tell your lawyer about it, just to make sure. But in my perspective, it's just always better to have a conversation so the lawyer can take a look at that report, see if there's anything that it could potentially impact, because it depends on like what exactly happened.
Okay. How does filing for EAD work under compelling circumstances? How long does it take? I do have I-140 under EB-1A approved.
So compelling circumstances is interesting because technically it's supposed to be an accelerated pathway, because you're basically telling the government, I have an emergency, I have a scenario, I wasn't expecting this, that's why it's compelling, right? In my experience, it can be as quick as 3 weeks to a month, but it can also languish a lot longer than that. It really depends on the officer or the agent that's adjudicating your compelling circumstances application. What is really, really important is that you have a lot of proof to show the dire circumstances that you are in. It's not simply that, oh, you know, I no longer have a job and I need to have a job. It should be, I no longer have a job, I can't support XYZ, my kid might be sick, or I need to support their hospital bills. It needs to be, frankly, compelling.
Okay. I'm currently working on F1 CPT and my F1 CPT ends on May 10th, Saturday. I'm continuing my employment with the same company and my OPD starts on 13th May, Tuesday. Can I take PTO on 12th?
So PTO is theoretically a paid day, right? You're being paid for your income, but you don't have the authorization to work those days. So my perspective is that you should be unpaid during that time because you didn't have work authorization on Monday.
Hmm. So in this case, she can just say like, "Hey, I'm gonna take time off on Monday, but you don't need to pay me."
Yeah, essentially you want to not be treated as like a true employee. That day you shouldn't be garnering an income on a day that you're not allowed to have income.
Okay, nice. All right, lots of question. I am on STEM OPT and it's expired February 2027. I'm not sure. Oh, there it is. Sorry. I am having employer and proper pay slips documents as I am working as a software engineer. I'm planning to travel to India. Is that okay?
That's a loaded question on itself, right? I think, if you have a valid F1 stamp, and there's nothing really wrong history-wise, that I don't see why not. But always remember that whenever you leave the country, you're not necessarily guaranteed the right to come back, right? Especially in a tumultuous period right now, I usually tell people, please try to avoid any unnecessary travel until things kind of start to stabilize, right? There's just too much influx right now to really consider any unnecessary travel or more leisurely travels.
And obviously, if there's a family emergency or some medical emergencies, things like that, there's no. Would you say like at that point there's not really like an option?
Yeah, if you don't have an option to travel, then travel. Always bring the best documents that you can, right? At the end of the day, some of the officers are, human beings as well, right? So whenever you provide a reason for your travel, so long as, again, no criminality in the past, you've been maintaining your status, you have a valid visa stamp, there's no reason why they wouldn't necessarily let you back into the country.
And one of the questions that was asked in our previous session, I couldn't get to it, was what if I'm getting married? Should I postpone the marriage? Like postpone
Uh,
the wedding?
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's like if you're marrying a U.S. citizen, I guess that's what a lot of people are concerned about, right? Which is like, what if I try to come back and they said like, oh, you're now married to a U.S. citizen? I haven't had a lot of high incidences of people having issues, but always be prepared, right? Always make sure like you have that single intent. You're not trying to permanently immigrate to the United States if you're on an F1. But yeah, I mean, getting married to me is kind of similar to a family emergency, right? There's a lot of other considerations. You don't want a soon-to-be wife or a soon-to-be husband to be upset at you, right? Because that's a lifelong upsetness, let's say. So
Yeah.
I wouldn't recommend jeopardizing that.
Agreed. All right. Proposal. So this is follow up. Proposal is using my finance and tax knowledge to educate and empower small business. They make up 44% of the economy, but fail due to lack of knowledge.
So I will not lie to you. Usually, people who are tax professionals really do struggle with the NIW concept, primarily because the argument can be like, oh, I'm trying to get a lot of businesses to pay more taxes, right? The government doesn't really feel that that's some national interest, weirdly enough. My perspective, though, Shabin, is that if you wanted to, let's say, strengthen your case, you're really going to have to prove that people are interested in your services, that people are interested in working with you, right? To show that national scale of impact, right? The more perspective or the less proof that you have that something's going to happen or be available to you, the more likely that the government will push back on that national interest waiver argument.
Yeah. Okay. Is it okay to fly out of USA on H-1B for a quick trip? Should I avoid travel at this moment?
Well, H1B is a little bit different than an F1, right? Like the reality is that F1 is only slightly above the totem pole compared to like a B1, B2, right? H1Bs are relatively strong visas. The government can't necessarily decline you entry because of lack of ties to your home country, right? So again, I think Xavier does really depend on your background. Is there anything that you feel in your past is a little bit tricky or dicey, right? Did you accidentally not work in the right place? Did you not tell the government something that you probably should have told them, right? Taking into that risk analysis, you should make the judgment call on whether or not it's okay for you to leave the country. right? Because at the end of the day, every time you leave and you try to come back, you're opening yourself up to an inquiry. Either whether it's CBP asking you questions, right, at the passport border entry, right, or alternatively, if you need a new visa stamp, you're asking the Department of State to open up your file and ask you questions as well.
Nice. Like that. Okay. Can I actually switch my employers while my STEM OPT request is pending? My International Student Services, assuming that's what it means, said it can be done if I can get new updated training plan I-983.
I see. So it's currently pending. I can only assume that either A, your underlying OPT is valid, or B, you're relying on the automatic extension. Honestly, ISS usually controls, right? The updated I-983 should be okay for you to switch employers. You just need definitely a brand new one that complies with the terms of the I-983.
Okay. Rahul is saying my service is terminated and passport is going to expire in mid-July. What are my options now?
I guess I need more information. Why was your service terminated? Were you ever granted a grace period? Like, what was kind of like the context? If your service was terminated and revoked because of the similar things that you're hearing on the news, this is actually a very loaded question, and you need to talk to an attorney on a one-on-one consultation. There's a lot of like confidential info that you're probably going to need to share with us to make a really strong judgment call on what can be done.
Okay. I-94 expires with old passport on 17th November 2025. Do I have to travel out of country to renew it, or is there any other way by contacting CBP I can renew it while staying in United States? H4 is valid till 2027.
So now, if you renew your passport domestically in the U.S., as far as I understand, a lot of countries allow you to renew a passport through a consulate or an embassy in the United States. If you get a new passport, you can always file an extension in the U.S., right? You can say, hey, I need to extend my I-94 based on my husband's, because it's an H4, my husband's period of stay. One critical element that people don't realize is that your visa stamp is just an entry document. What determines what you're allowed to stay for or how long you can stay for, Sonal, on an H4 is how long your spouse's approval is on the H-1B is valid for. But you can file a domestic extension instead of traveling.
I love your answers. Okay, my spouse and kids, H4 extension and EAD are in progress. Can one of my kids travel with me to India for stamping? Will this affect my spouse's H4 extension or EAD?
So in terms of, so let's see, can one of my kids travel with me to India for stamping? Will this affect my spouse's H4 extension or EAD? If your spouse stays in the United States, right, and has an H4 pending with the extension and the EAD, and your H-1B was already approved for that new timeline, then there shouldn't be an impact, in my point of view. I think the question changes a bit if your spouse leaves, but there's a lot of benefits to doing that as well, but we can have a discussion.
Yeah.
Right. So let's see here. Sorry,
Still,
our light,
no, I still see you. I see the light went off, but it's all good. Wait time comparison for EB2 national interest waiver to green card versus EB1 to G's green card for India born. Neither process started yet.
So ultimately speaking, the reason why the EB1 is called the EB1 is because it's a first preference category, right? So what I will say is that EB1 will always technically be faster than the EB2 because the EB1 is theoretically harder to acquire and it's the fastest category.
I am incoming fall 2025 Columbia student. I was in US from 2021 to 2023 and a speeding ticket in US in 2021. Should I be worried for F1 interview?
So what I tell a lot of people in this context is that it's hard to say if people should be worried. I think what people should do, though, to lessen their chances of a significant issue is to be prepared. Like preparation is everything, right? So if you know that you had a speeding ticket in 2021, my recommendation is to call the court that adjudicated the ticket and get a certificate of disposition or proof that the case was closed and all that information. So I'll give you an example. When I submitted documents for the bar, I was asked to provide proof that I closed my 2013 speeding ticket. from ages ago. I had to call Copic County, right? And call this nice little old lady who was the clerk there and say, can you just send me a screenshot or a scan of that certificate? Usually you can do it all online or over the phone. If you get someone who's really nice, they'll do it for free. If not, it could be a very nominal fee from $2 to $5 or something like that. Once you have that certificate, if an officer ever asks, at least you can show them, hey, this was not a big deal. It was already closed, right? I paid my dues, my restitution, all this kind of stuff. And I would recommend that you get that before your interview if possible.
Nice. Yeah. Okay. I am currently working on F1 CPD. I think we covered this. So we are good there. Travel domestically on OPT safe. What documents to carry?
So if you're staying domestically, before we talk about some of the OPT stuff, I want to remind everybody about the real ID requirements that are coming up.
Yes.
Right? So a lot of people forgot about it because they had been extending this for nearly a decade, in my point of view. Like we were supposed to upgrade to real ID ages ago. First, number one is that if you have a driver's license instead of some format, make sure to upgrade it to real ID or an enhanced version that your state allows. That will help you out. But similar to my answer to all of the other students who are asking me, what do I need to carry now because of all the new rules? You want to have a form of identification. You want to have your OPT paperwork, as in like your EAD card. You also want to have the I-20 on you, right, to really show to the government that you're here, you're lawfully allowed to be here. I don't necessarily think that they're hunting people who are trying to fly from California to Las Vegas for some reason, but you always want to have the right documents on you to show to anyone who asks you that you're allowed to be here.
I like how you chose Las Vegas as the choice for the students. Okay, I received mail from PA Revenue Service about delinquent ENT tax payment. I paid the dues 400. I am on OPT, got H1B picked. Should I be worried? No collection.
So the only thing that I can say is that you must always be compliant with the law here in the United States. I don't know what to say when it comes to Pennsylvania specific rules. What I will say is that don't get scammed, right? Sometimes you'll get like letters or calls from people purporting to be from the tax authorities saying that you owe this or you owe that. So first thing you should do before freaking out about your status is you need to talk to a tax professional and be like, is this like a real issue, right? One thing that I always remind people is that when you're here on an F1 on a student visa, many countries actually have tax treaties that allow them to not have to pay U.S. taxes or certain taxes on a state level, but you need to talk to a tax professional to determine that. But anyone who doesn't comply with the law, you should always assume that there could be a problem. But it's hard for me to say with just this because I'm a little bit suspicious, let's say.
Yeah. And I just want to kind of add on to what Nicole said. She said not pay, you still have to file the return. You may not be paying the tax because of the treaty, but you still have to file it.
Correct. Yeah. So the reality is that as immigration attorneys, as much as we try to help everyone, we're not tax professionals. You can blame the 2008 crisis for not letting me say a lot of things, right? All I can say is that you want to talk to the right people, whether it's somebody in H&R Block or international superstar tax accountant based in Miami.
Did you pass your accounting exam?
That's a good question. I did take accounting for law school. I don't know if lawyers should be doing accounting, to be honest with you. I think we like to do Hollywood accounting, but it's I would not trust myself to be a good accountant. Let's say that.
Yeah. Okay. All right. I am Indian citizen living on H1B. Can I do business in India while sitting in the United States?
So I will say this is that the government's determination of lawful or unlawful work can come down to active or passive, right? If you are a passive investor in a foreign business, no big deal, right? You're not really doing much. You're just collecting your dividends, right? But you shouldn't really be doing anything in the US if you're on an H-1B outside of the employer that sponsored you for the H-1B, even if the source of income is outside of the United States. When you're here on an H-1B, you should be working for that H-1B employer or any employers that have an approved H-1B with you, like in a concurrent H-1B context.
Okay. Couple of questions on OPT. So maybe you can generalize it. There was a bill that was introduced to eliminate OPT. And I know I've talked about this, that there are so many bills that get introduced, but I would love to hear what you think.
I think it would be hard to pass this because there's so many stakeholders on both sides of the aisle that don't want this to happen, right? Like the reality is that I think most of tech is reliant on people who are on OPT or STEM OPT, right? I think a lot of industries are, whether it's nursing, which really is in dire circumstances when you're talking about a labor force, to physicians and the like, right? I just think that there's so many, let's call it interested parties lobbying, like let's say, that would really counter against this. Like as much as the rhetoric is out there, I think it's going to be a really hard sell in my perspective. I think it's possible that they could make, let's say, STEP OPT harder, right? Restricting like the list, or maybe making the requirements tougher, or maybe OPT now has to do E-Verify as well. But there's so many things that can happen. The bill is so early on. Just to let everybody know, when a bill gets introduced, it's like their maximum effect. By the time everything gets negotiated, things change, the clauses change, and it can become a completely different looking item by the time it actually passes the law.
Yep. I'm on H-1B cap exempt and my initial 3 years ends February 2026. What can my company plan for an extension? Will I be eligible for H-1B pilot program stamping in United States, or do I need to go to India?
Okay, so let's break down the question. How early can your company plan for extension? My perspective is the earliest that anyone can file for an extension is 6 months before the expiration of their current validity date, right? In terms of whether you're eligible for the H-1B pilot program, never rely on the pilot program, because I think only a very, very small subset of people are eligible and everybody misses it. And there's only like a few thousand slots anyways, right? Trust me, you're more likely than not to qualify for it. And in terms of needing to go to India, I have to remind people there is a big difference between the visa stamp in your passport and the I-797 green piece of paper approval. If you're already in the United States and your extension is successfully filed and ultimately approved, you can stay here. You never actually need to leave the country. You don't have to have a visa stamp. The visa stamp is only required if you ever wanted to leave and come back to the United States.
Okay. He has a 3-part question. I am currently in PhD program, but due to funding constraints, I have to graduate with a second master's instead. During my first master's, I have already used my OPT and STEM OPT. I was picked in H-1B lottery during first master's STEM OPT period, but since I went for PhD program, my company retrieved my application back. What options do I have now if I want to work in industry?
Oh, okay. All
Also,
right.
if there is a way to use unused STEM OPT extension.
Okay. Number one is that when you have a history like this, attorney consultation definitely would be very helpful to parse out the timelines, but I'm going to make a few assumptions here, right? My assumption when it comes to the H-1B thing is that you were selected in the lottery, but they never filed the full H-1B application and you never got the approval. If that is the case, man, did I wish that you decided to focus on the H-1B first, because it's already hard enough to win. I would have wanted you to get approved. You can do your PhD like 6 months later, right? But in that case, you wouldn't be able to like resuscitate or revive the previous H-1B lottery selection because it's gone back into the pool, right? Now, in terms of like your options, you wouldn't be able to get OPT if you already fully utilized your OPT at a master's degree level, right? If you had graduated with a PhD, you would have gotten a new refresh, but a second master's is still a master's level of education. And you only get one set of that OPT. The other thing that I will note to you is that if you fully exhausted that OPT period at a master's degree level, then you can't use a STEM extension even if you never used the STEM extension, because that's the key term. It's an extension. STEM OPT is an extension of an existing OPT. So if you don't have the right to an OPT or that initial OPT period, you can't get another STEM extension, even if you wanted to.
Nicole, have you thought about teaching? You are like a really
if only, right? But I guess my career landed me in that sort of direction right now.
explaining. I understood. So, okay. My F1 visa is expiring in May 2025. But course finishes in April 2026. Same shows on I-20. Planning to go to India in August. Can I travel and extend my visa?
So this goes back to like that common thing, which is like there's a big difference between the visa stamp on your passport and when you're allowed to be here. Guys, your I-20 controls, if you're here in the United States and you have F1 DS on your I-94, what allows you to stay in the United States and be here is your I-20 and that program end date, right? Now, the only thing is that if you decide to travel in August and you want to extend your F1, theoretically you can if you have an OPT approved afterwards, right? That's one thing that I will say, oh, I realize it's a different year. But if it's April 2026, then yes, you can travel and get a new F1 stamp. But remember what I said earlier, which is that any unnecessarily travel, I wouldn't do it. Remember that every single time you go to the consulate, you're opening yourself up to a new level of inquiry, right? Only travel if it's necessary, if it's an emergency, or maybe if you don't want to upset a fiance in the future, if you need to get married, I can't change that part, right? So technically, yes, you can go. You can definitely get it renewed, but you're not required to do so. You can just stay the entire time.
But it comes with the risk, like you mentioned, that what if you go for interview and they don't approve it, or you get 221 or whatever.
Or even like something like administrative processing. Hey, I need more time to review your application. Some people think that admin processing is done in like a week or two, but Yuri, you and I have met people who were stuck in admin processing for 6 months, a year and a half, right? So the reality is that unnecessary travel, especially right now where things are tumultuous and the consulates are a little bit overwhelmed, I try not to encourage it at the moment.
Yep, 100%. Okay. I recently went through open brain surgery and I will be in a short-term disability leave from next week. Still, my job is valid, but insurance pays 70%. Does this affect my H-1B extension approval?
I see. So here's the rule, right? The rule and what the government checks is whether or not truly you are still considered an employee of the company, right? If the company still treats you as an employee, even if you're on medical leave, and this is like a normal behavior on the part of the employer, then you're good, right? The issue becomes more if the employer completely removed you off of, payroll, or they're not completely treating you as a normal employee would, right? And that's where things get a little bit dicey. I would recommend in this circumstance, whoever your company's attorneys are, that you sit down and you ask them like, hey, what are the relevant Department of Labor regulations that you're going to be using to argue my case, to make sure that I'm still maintaining the appropriate status. But that's usually the general rule of thumb is, are they still truly treating you as an employee? And unfortunately, because you're going through a medical situation, right, they're currently temporarily pausing you, but giving you the right benefits for it.
Yep. Okay. Working on STEM OPT, an employer forgot to run a E-Verify case for 5 months. Employer was E-Verified when applied for STEM OPT and got approved. What are the issues?
So you're working on STEM OPT, but the employer forgot to, so when you say run an E-Verify case, they forgot to submit you into the E-Verify system is what I think you're saying. If you could clarify that, that would be helpful, because if what you're instead saying is that your employer never enrolled in E-Verify and you were accidentally approved for STEM OPT, that's where things get tricky, because you're only supposed to be working for an employer who is E-Verify, right? In that kind of circumstance, I think timing is everything. You are theoretically allowed to be, let's call it, unemployed for a period of time under STEM OPT. But other things that could become problematic is that, remember that a violation of your STEM OPT can be considered grounds for termination for your service, right? So I would need that clarification, because if it's really that they were never e-verified in the first place, that is a more serious issue than if they forgot to submit the e-verification for your I-9. That's more of an employer issue then.
Yeah. Okay. Does PP increase RFE chances for EB1A or EB2?
I can't prove it, but I would say, yeah, it would, right?
What's PP?
Premium processing.
Oh, gotcha.
Right. And the only reason why is because it's mathematically and logically, it kind of makes sense. The government will never like say it. They will never affirm it, right? But think of it logically. Let's say you filed an application, right? You filed EB1A and you know that the answer is going to come back within 15 business days because you filed for premium processing. You know just as much as I do how many people are applying for this particular category, and that the officers, like in terms of the workforce, is basically being hopped, right? So in that same 3-week timeline, not only do they have to adjudicate your application, they have to adjudicate all of the other applicants that are on their desk that used to be done with 2x the workforce, right? So the reason why it increases the RFE chances isn't because there's anything wrong sometimes with your application. It's just frankly time. Right? The officers don't necessarily want to get audited by their supervisors if they accidentally approve someone that shouldn't have qualified for the EB1A. So what is the best way to CYA yourself, right? As an officer, issue a RFE, right? Now, I can't prove that. There's a lot of people who do get approved immediately with premium processing. I have a lot of clients who have gotten direct approvals, right? But there's a reason why anecdotally all over Reddit, all over the forums, people are saying, the same thing. Hey, I see an uptick in RFEs for people who pay for premium processing.
Okay. I applied for change of status from B2 to H1B. If I secure a new job, will there be any issues with applying for H1B again? Additionally, I have a dismiss speeding ticket in the school zone ticket. Could this affect my H1B approval or travel to India for visa stamping later this year?
So if you change your status from B1, B2 to H1B before, I don't see that being an issue again if you decided to try to come back on an H1B or change status again, so long as you qualify for the H1B, right? In terms of the dismissed speeding in a school zone ticket, right? Like speeding tickets, violations, and the like the biggest reason why it's so hard for me as an attorney in a general context like this to give specific advice is because it depends. Like, is it in your state that speeding on a school zone ticket is considered a really serious offense? No idea, right? Some states take it very loose, others don't. But what I will say is that, sometimes logic stands, practicality stands, right? If it was really, really easy for you to deal with and it was truly dismissed because whether it's you were acquitted from it or like you managed to do something that was kind of like an easy fix, let's call it, right? There shouldn't be too strong of a reason. You might get questions, but remember what I said in an earlier question. If you have previous tickets, get the disposition, get the proof that it was all closed, how you closed it, etc., because you're going to need that proof to explain yourself.
Yeah. Okay. Oh, Ashley says, thank you, Yuri. This is helpful. Well, thank you, Ashley.
Thank you, Ashley, for being here.
Yeah, I have an arrest record, but case was dismissed and got it sealed. I'm going to try green card now. What are my chances of being rejected versus approved?
So again, a loaded question because I don't know what you were arrested for. I don't know what the case was about, right? There is a big difference between I was arrested for a misdemeanor public intoxication because I got too drunk outside versus I was arrested for attempted murder, right? Like big difference, right, between the two, right? Number one is that even if something was sealed, even if something was dismissed, you still have to declare it to the government. An arrest, an indictment, all of those things are enough, right? So copies, proofs, that you need all of that stuff. If you don't have access to it, call the courts. If not, you might be able to do an FBI FOIA request, Freedom of Information Act request, to get all of this information. In terms of chances of rejected or approved, it really depends on what you were arrested for and what happened. Like, why was it dismissed? Did you have to admit something to get it dismissed, right? There's so many things that go into this layered question.
Yeah. Okay. Can I travel domestically after May 7th on expired visa stamp, but My SEVIS, I-20, I-994 are valid as I am on day one CPT. Also, I don't have a real ID and state is not giving me as the visa is expired.
So let's see here. Can I travel domestically after May 7th on an expired visa stamp, but my 7th I-20 I-94 is valid, right? If you mean domestically, like from like California
to Vegas.
kind of thing. Well, first of all, you could always drive that. I used to drive that when I was younger, right? But what I will say is that technically on domestic travel, you only need your passport. You just need some sort of identification to get on the plane. It's international travel where things get difficult, but bring your SEVIS paperwork, bring your I-20, bring, all the proofs that you need while you travel to show that you're in valid status. You really only need your passport to board a plane domestically here in the US.
Yeah. Okay, this guy is very angry. I had an internship and did a job with my full-time bachelor's in India. Will it be problem according to US visa officer? And also I applied for Shanghai business. Okay. Visa for training and got rejected. Will this be a problem?
So when you say that you had an internship and did a job with my full-time bachelor's in India, like I'm not sure how that would impact and why it would have a problem for a U.S. visa officer. I think where it could be a problem is if you were in the United States completing your bachelor's degree and you were unlawfully working while you were doing your bachelor's degree, right? Now, in terms of a denial for a Schengen visa, the reality is that I will never know what information is shared cross-nationally between people. I think what you need to consider to yourself is, why were you denied that Schengen visa, right? If there was something wrong with your history, or there's something that's leading you to feel distressed or suspicious or concerned, that's the thing that you need to think about, and you need to provide a really solid answer to if you were to go to a U.S. consulate for a process. But I don't know why working while you were in your bachelor's degree in India is going to have a problem.
Due to hotel booking, he says, due to hotel booking, I'm not sure what that means. They will not think that you will also work here.
I'm a little confused still. I'm not going to lie to you, Yuri. Is it that he's trying to apply for a tourist visa and like...
No, I understand what he's saying. He's saying he did an internship and a full-time job after his bachelor's degree. So he's thinking that what if visa officers think that after his master's, he'll also do internship and full-time, which job. So that would cause a rejection. I think that's what he's saying.
Okay. In that particular case, listen, when it comes to applying for anything with a U.S. visa officer, right? At the end of the day, they're still human beings, right? You need to come across as charming as possible, with the best answers possible, as reasonably as possible, with the right documents, right? I always tell people that as much as an immigration attorney as I am, and I can tell and advise people what to say, maybe like what are like good things to highlight, bad things to kind of try to avoid, right? Half of the battle is you sitting there in front of the officer and being confident and being reasonable about the answers to your question, right? So in that case, I think for you, it's try not to stress yourself out, right? The more stressed out you look, the more concerned the officer will be, all right?
Yeah. Okay. If student plan to work through legit staffing agency for a legit client, what's the chances for service termination or adjustment of status? USA has approved STEM extensions with I-93 submitted with my client manager.
So I'm assuming that you're saying that you're getting your STEM OPT extension through a staffing agency or through a essentially like a consulting firm. I find like the consulting firms have it easier because if you're working for like a Cognizant of the world, right? That means that you're actually reporting to Cognizant. You're doing work for Cognizant. It's just that the end client happens to be like a Google or a Meta or something like that, right? But for staffing agencies, things get a little bit different, right? Because the whole point of the I-983 or the STEM OPT program is that you're supposed to be learning through that specific employer that's listed on the I-983 form, right? You're not really supposed to be going elsewhere and reporting to like end clients ultimately. So what I will say is that staffing agencies, I get a lot more concerned about. Consulting firms, a little bit different.
Yep. What's the status of premium processing of H4 EAD when clubbed together with H1 extension?
So I think what you're referring to is back under Biden, the government kind of agreed that, we'll do our best to adjudicate everything together because there's no such thing as premium processing for H4s, et cetera, et cetera. And then under Trump, it kind of went down the wayside. What I will tell you is that in our recent applications, they've been adjudicating them around the same time still, right? So I think there's still like a genuine interest to do so, right? But we're still in the early days of this new administration. It is very possible it will start to take longer than before. So hear me out, Narajan. The faster and the earlier you do everything, the better it is. I also want to tell people a trick, right? And this is some secret sauce, Yudi, that you're going to get from me, right? What I want to remind people is that there is such thing as an automatic extension of an EAD for people on H4, but if and only if their I-94s, right, are valid through that extension period. So now this is where people get confused because they're like, well, Nicole, my H4 is always filed concurrently with my husband's H1B. When would my I-94 ever exceed that end date, right? So here's the trick. If your husband files an H1B early, right, their extension, let's say it's like 3 or 4 months before their expiration date, they pay for premium processing and they get that approved. And your H4 stamp is still valid, right? Because it was valid until the previous approval, hear me out, right? That H4 spouse should literally go up to Canada, right? If they can, carry their husband's approval notice with their marriage certificate and that valid H4, come back into the country, and guess what? You have a brand new I-94. The I-94 is valid until the end of the extension period, right?
Oh,
so you don't have to file the 539. Once you come back to the country, you can file the 765, and that's it. When you file the 765, even though your H4 EAD card's about to expire, you now have the automatic extension period. Why? Because your I-94 is valid. You don't need the 539 if you still have a valid H4 stamp. And usually you do if you time it right. So that's why corporate attorneys need to be smarter about the immigration strategies. A lot of my previous corporate clients, I used to tell them, listen, company, you don't need to pay that much. You shouldn't keep filing these 539s. Just tell them to leave and come back on their valid stamps on H4 and you're good to go, right? So the reality is that that's my trick.
Love it. Okay. We'll take last 2 questions because they are here and then we'll call it. Can that stamp, this is a follow-up, can that stamp employment through staffing agency result in service termination?
I think that if truly you're not reporting to the staffing agency, right, and they're not the ones who are truly hiring you and determining your work and your day-to-day, I am more concerned about the context of your STEM employment, right? I really will say that you have to think about the spirit of the law, or the spirit and the intention behind the I-983, which is that you're supposed to be learning directly from the employer of record, not through some sort of intermediary. All right. Service termination doesn't come down to me. It actually comes down to how your school decides to report it. Some DSOs are nicer than others. Some schools have different policies than others. So I think that's really, Kazi, a conversation that you need to have with an attorney to determine whether or not this is going to have an impact. Because it's hard for me to know unless I see your I-20 and you give me more details about how the staffing agency works.
Yeah. Okay. Last question. Here we go. Can I switch my H1B to F1 to pursue my PhD without leaving US?
Yeah, you can. Yeah, there's nothing prohibiting you. I also want to let you know you are allowed on your H1B to work full time and go to school part time at the same time. Like you don't have to be working only on the H1B, just letting you know that, right? If you really want to preserve your H1B time and you want to do an F1, you can domestically change your status. You just need an I-20. Timing matters, obviously. Like if the F1 is too far in the future, obviously, what I mean is that the start date of the schooling program is too far in the future. You just have to make sure you file a little bit later than that. I would recommend premium processing at that time as well.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Nicole. Again, if you need any other consultation, my link will be in the description. You will get discount from Manifest. Manifest has multiple lawyers. I do want to say, like, you may not get Nicole, so because some people will be like, I didn't get Nicole. So
well, what I want to say is that like the attorneys that work for us, they're heavily vetted, right? Give you guys an example, right? We'll get like 500 to 1,000 resumes, and we only pick less than 20 to work with us, right? And there's a reason for that. I really do pride myself in giving top of class service, right? Top of class information and insights. So if you want the same, then that's what I would encourage you to schedule a consultation with us.
100%. Dharmil, yes, please go ahead and ask. Seems like a very urgent. He kept pinging like multiple times.
Okay, let's see.
If you want to, urgent, yes, just ask the question. Let's see. We are waiting. I think he's probably typing at this point.
I get it. Although I will say my average typing speed is about 80 words per minute. It's kind of like intense. So I'm expecting everyone here to type faster.
80 words per minute.
So before I, decided to become a lawyer and all that kind of stuff, like I spent a lot of time playing a lot of video games. So for everybody on this chat, like I used to play a lot of StarCraft, and StarCraft requires you to have a lot of quick hitting of the buttons, right? You're talking like 100 actions per minute. So that's kind of extrapolated.
My speaking speed is like 105-ish. So I'm like, wow, that's very fast. Okay, here we go. His question is here. My service got terminated on my STEM OPT in April, which was otherwise going to expire in July. This happened due to careless driving conviction. Okay. Now I got married and filed for I-485, I-130, and I-765 in January. And my I-65 got approved in March, and I have been working on that, dodged a bullet. However, will I start the deportation process?
Okay. All right. So loaded question, right? I'm not going to lie to you.
The last one, but the loaded one.
Yeah, I know. Because I want to know, like, for example, when did you file the 485? How long was it, between then, right? But here's what I will say. We're living in the day and age where you could get NTA'd for anything. To make it clear for everyone, sometimes even if you're in a valid status, you might randomly get a letter in the mail or a notification that you have a notice to appear. That's when you know that something is happening or some sort of process is occurring, right? That's number one. Number two, if you ever get stopped, documents. This also extends beyond just the F1s that we've been talking to. For you, Dharmik, you need to bring copies of your 485 receipt. You need to bring the receipt of the I-130, bring your EAD card as well, right? You need to bring it all. I can never remove from the realm of possibility that you could get deported for whatever reason, only because we're seeing it on the news. You have green card holders being accidentally shipped off to El Salvador, right? Even with all of these court orders protecting them, right? The only thing that I can highly recommend is to make sure you bring all the documents that you have with you wherever you travel at this moment, whenever you're driving, at least copies at the bare minimum. And separately, you need to have a good immigration lawyer on speed dial, right? So that if anything were to happen, you got to call them real quick. All right.
Yeah. Someone says excellent answers. Also, someone said gamer turned lawyer. Nice combo.
Yeah, honestly, like I pride myself in trying to know as much as I can, not necessarily about immigration, but a lot of different fields, right? I think the reason why we have such a high rate of approvals at Manifest is because a lot of us have a lot of really strong technical backgrounds, right? Like I really love the technology field. I build my own computers. I have a custom built keyboard because I like being finicky with that, right? So I love it when I meet an engineer because I want to.
I didn't get to meet you when I was in New York. Hopefully we'll pick this up next
For
visit.
sure.
Can I ask one last question?
Sure.
My I-797 get extended while I'm in USA. How do I get my electronic I-94 updated?
You don't need to do that. You will get an I-94. So if you got an extension approved, truly an extension, the bottom of your 797, right, is your new I-94. There's a paper version. There's usually a line that you can clip. If you didn't get that, then your attorney did. Like someone has the original copy with it. There is a way technically online for you to request a new I-94, but you don't really need it. Like you should just use that paper. That's the best one. Trust me. The electronic records are a mess anyways. So.
Nice. Okay. Also, if anybody wants to send an email, is there an email they can?
If you guys are interested, if you have any questions or you want to talk about anything in a consultation, you're more than welcome to shoot an email to help@manifestlaw.com. That's HEL as in Leo, P as in Peter, @manifest, MAN as in Nancy, IFEST, law, LAW.com. Yep,
is that
perfect.
correct?
Yep.
There we go. Nice. All right, awesome. Thank you, everybody. Nicole, I can't wait to bring you back. Hopefully, we'll keep doing this. And again, thank you so much. I know people loved it. I loved your answers as well. I feel like I learned a lot. So hopefully, we'll keep doing this. Thank you, everybody. We will be back soon.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks for having me here.
But Nicole, you stay on the call once again
Okay.
before I end it.